Good day, everybody. My name is Matthew Donahue, and I am the market planner for state and local tax and regulatory here at LexisNexis Risk Solutions. Today, the International Association of Assessing Officers, this virtual presentation is going to be on Homestead exemption audit programs. As a reminder, this is a recorded session. We will have a live Q&A afterwards, so please hold your questions. And I will now introduce the speakers. So next slide, please. All right, I do want to get in before I introduce everybody that I do want to admit that this was the most fun I have ever had making a presentation. We called these three panelists the Three Amigos, amongst other things. It was a very illuminating experience for me, and let me get into it. So our first chief appraiser panelist is Roland Altinger. He's been in the real estate business since 1985. He has fished the Rockies to Alaska and the entire Gulf Stream. And boy, if you ever want to hear about fishing, he's the guy to go to. If you don't like it, it doesn't matter. You're still going to hear about it. He is a football jock, and I got to admit, I liked having those guys around when I was in school because they made me look a lot smarter. He does have a lot of numbers in his brief, so he promises to be brief. And we just want to make sure that everybody knows he's from Harris County. And that's down in Houston, Texas, which I think is just a great place to never visit. It's just too dang hot. Our next speaker is Dinah Kilgore. She started her career in 1972 in El Paso City's tax office as a clerk, and she claims that she started her career at the age of 12. She was born and raised in El Paso, and I have to let everybody know I did learn that El Paso is in Texas, and that was a surprise to the other speakers as well. It is in a different time zone, so we have all kinds of different time zones here. Wow, Texas is big. She did start working, and she says she had great mentors and a lot of gumption and a lot of elbow grease, and she advanced through the leadership ranks locally and across the state. And you may know that she is part of IAAO. And she does admit to being married to the same man for 50 years, and that makes her more than qualified to deal with any sort of property valuation or tax issues, especially the more difficult ones. And the last speaker we have today is Martin Villarreal. This is probably my favorite picture ever. I'm pretty sure he was listening to Purple Rain when that one was taken, because he even admits it was a very old picture. So we have to be very concerned about what he does on the internet. He does want to say he does look different. His hair is thinning and is somewhat grayer, but he's looking forward to meeting somebody who can step into his shoes and reap the rewards of government services. And we'll go to the next slide, please. All right, I'll be very brief because I think everybody here kind of understands a little bit about Homestead and why you want to audit. I've been doing this for 25 years, and I know almost everybody here has been doing it for longer, and I'm a data guy. So I have never found a data set that couldn't be cleaned. And when you do a cleaning like this, it helps you make better decisions. We all think our data is clean, but then if you look at the way you receive the data, if you look at how that data comes to you and how it changes over time, and we'll go to the next slide, please. Are we going to the next slide? Well, I want to say, while we're waiting, I want to say that there we go. People are messy, and they don't necessarily understand really what you're trying to do with the information. They could do their names kind of differently. They do change their where they live. Before COVID-19, a lot of people changed to the United States. It always surprises my cohorts in the international side of the business. And people misrepresent themselves, either on purpose or not really meaning to pay attention to it. Remember, most folks are filling out your forms and want to get through it as fast as possible. And go to the next slide, please. And property is possibly the messiest data set I have ever seen. And I want to tell you that structured doesn't mean clean. I get to look at a lot of property data out there. It changes rapidly. Again, we have misrepresentations in there. And we have people who are messing with the system on purpose, and we have people who are just not paying attention enough. You have a lot of interesting information that you can find in there and make better decisions. And go to the next slide. And I'll go through this very quickly. And this is kind of how I look at the universe of it. These are all the different things, or well, not all of them, but these are the most likely things that you're going to find once you do an audit. And I think it's very important for you guys to look at your data, do an audit like this, and make sure you're having the right people pay the right amount and not giving the wrong people too many exemptions. There's a lot of reasons for this, and I'll let everybody else kind of get into their thought processes and what they've seen. And the first person I'm going to turn this over to, next slide, please, is Mr. Altinger.
Well, thank you, Matthew, and hello to everyone that is participating in this IAAO session. I am Roland Altinger, the Chief Appraiser for HCAD, or the Harris County Appraisal District. And as folks know and they're aware of, Harris County is just plain big. It's kind of like the size of my nose. In fact, HCAD is the largest appraisal district in the galaxy that does a complete reappraisal every year. First slide, please. No, leave it on that slide, I'm sorry. Yep. We appraise roughly 1.8 million parcels every year with just over 300 appraisers. Now, this might sound like magic, you ask yourself. Nope, not at all. We have great people. In fact, I think I have the best staff in the world, and that staff is working really hard to make things work. However, in any large operation, there are no small tasks, because a small error in just one task, repeated on thousands of accounts, ends up being huge. You'll see what I mean in a minute. Next slide, please. People ask, why did HCAD spend over $1 million on its first audit of homestead exemptions? That is a good question. Let's start with the basics. And this one is the biggest basic. People hate to pay taxes. We all agree. But what we do even hate more than that is thinking that their neighbor is paying less, putting one over on us. Payment of property taxes is voluntary, and it's not withheld from our pay. For collection to work, the large majority of taxpayers have to perceive, and they must feel, it to be basically fair. Misery loves company is translated through the legal translation of taxes must be equal and uniform. In fact, that's actually in our Texas Constitution in the state of Texas. In Texas, for an exemption, someone to claim the residential homestead exemption, you must, as of January 1st, own and occupy, and you must also have it as your principal homestead. Now, there are additional exemptions that our state offers, such as the over 65 exemption, the disabled person exemption, the disabled veteran exemption, the surviving spouses of disabled veterans or disabled persons, etc. A total of 9 different exemptions, and each one of these different exemptions requires different requirements and different entitlements. Then, of course, each December, HCAD mails what we call our confirmation cards to all the property owners that have a homestead exemption in the county. These confirmation cards are not supposed to be forwarded if no longer at the specific address. The law requires us, if we get these confirmation cards back. You'd ask yourself, why is that? Well, people move, people die, people get divorced, partnerships dissolve. And depending on what stats you look out there on the internet, between 10 to 14% of the total US population moves each year. And then, of course, that doesn't include the different entitlements that change. Though owners are supposed to notify HCAD of changes, they don't always do so. So when you look at the confirmation cards that we get back, we roughly get about 25,000 cards back each year, where we manually start checking these cards. We look at the name and address in our CAMA system, and we check these common names such as Smith, Garcia win against the driver's license database, the voters' rolls, court records, and land records on people who did not update their driver's license. Now, in Texas, in our transportation code, you can be ticketed and fined if you do not update your driver's license within 30 days. Or let's think about the voter. What about if someone voted in their old precinct and their new precinct? That, of course, is a major no-no. And finally, we found grandkids living in grandpa's house years and years after he died, claiming the over 65 exemption. And this is where the fraud begins, which in essence shifts the tax burden. And unfortunately, we did not have the staff or the hours to run each and every detail on each one of those confirmation cards. Not only that, some moved out of the county, some moved out of the state, still claiming the exemptions at the specific property. And we lack access to data in other counties and other states. And some states don't even allow you to have access to that specific data. Basically, we were trying to assemble our kid's bicycle at 10 p.m. on Christmas Eve. We've all had to do that. And when that happens, it's not the most favorable thing to have happen to you, but the tool that we needed wasn't in the box. We needed a star wrench, and we didn't have it. What we had was a screwdriver, a hammer, and some duct tape. We didn't know that we needed a star wrench because we didn't know it existed. And then, of course, with regards to the conferences that we all attend in our professional life, we attended a conference, and there it was, vendors that had this specific information on multi-state databases using a wider data universe in a highly effective and efficient manner. Now we had to go out and get one. Next slide, please. That one's it there. We asked for bids and we got 3. The first bid was a Louisiana firm that offered a service on a contingency basis, and the fee was basically computed by looking at the percent of the taxes that they found. Now, obviously, they did not work, and it was not permitted for us to do this in the state of Texas. The second bidder was a law firm, the Lombard Law Firm. It's a large law firm in Texas, and they offered a turnkey service, but we wanted to have some control, and we wanted to maintain the control because we have some highly customized letters that we wanted to send out. The third vendor was LexisNexis, which offered the flexibility, and believe it or not, they were the lowest bidder in the process. Now, I want to make this clear. Hiring LexisNexis was not abracadabra. There was still a lot of work that we had to do on our end, and that's why we hired some temporary staff. LexisNexis ran our Homestead accounts through their database, flagging the ones they felt that needed in-depth review, and then HCAD hunted through the flagged accounts to find those needing any type of cancellation, any type of modification, or any type of requalification of the exemption. Now, at the appraisal districts in the state of Texas, we administer the exemptions, we issue tax sealing certificates, and we certify the tax roll. However, on the other hand, our taxing units send the supplemental tax bills. They impose and collect interest and penalties on those bills. And for example, on canceling an exemption, we had situations where a home was vacated for 2 or more years and the taxes were delinquent. Late payment penalties had to be incurred with the removal of the exemption. Now, there are situations in the statute that if you're claiming more than 3 homestead exemptions, there's a 50% penalty that can be added to that also. And the reason that it's 3 or more is a homestead exemption for someone that's over 65 can transfer to a new house mid-year, and that's what we call porting their sealing certificate. It's kind of like transport. So you could, in essence, in your database, have 2 recorded homesteads under the same name, and that's okay if it was prorated to avoid the double exemption. Next slide, please. Now, we received good support from our vendor, and together we developed a format for data to be passed back and forth. On receiving the list of flagged accounts, we did this in 2 batches because of our database being so large, and we received 32,000 accounts to review. HCAD reviewed, checked each account one at a time, examining the discrepancies, for example, the different names, the multiple addresses for the folks in and outside the state of Texas, folks living or voting elsewhere, the owners and spouses' ages, various deaths of owners, and then, of course, divorce. And with so many things to check for completeness, our team of reviewers went through the whole file in sweeps. First, they would look at X, then they would look at Y, and so on. This, of course, was a very grueling, arduous, and tedious task for our folks. Next slide, please. Now, here are the results of the first ever comprehensive homestead exemption audit at the Harris County Appraisal District. The numbers are really dry, not very exciting, but I want to draw your attention to something. LexisNexis looked at 850,000 accounts that had exemptions on them. 32 of those accounts needed a closer look. And in the end, and I say only 7,000, slightly over 7,000, 7,119 accounts needed change. Now that's just 0.8%. This, of course, was incredible appraisal work for our organization, and I have to give kudos for a great job. By the way, also HCAD has been named a top workplace 3 years running. Not only was that great appraisal work, guess who was happy? The taxing units were very happy, and homeowners out there got to realize that we are making sure that everybody is paying their fair share and it's allocated evenly. Now, for every nickel our taxing unit spent on this project, $1 of tax revenue was identified as owing, and some of these exemptions under a statute can go back as up to 5 years. This was so successful for HCAD, our board authorized us to continue and increase our licenses up to 30 with full access to the multi-state data. Last year, in addition to this, we were identified as one of 7 agencies in the U.S. recognized by Scoops News Group for the local IT innovation of the year because of this project. And then, of course, this year, we were the recipient in the administrative category of International Data Corp's Smart City Award for the North American continent. With that being said, I have to thank LexisNexis and this homestead project that we completed. Finally, that is all I have to tell you today, and I know we're going to stick around for questions, but I would just like to pass the mic on to Dinah Kilgore.
Thank you, Roland. I appreciate that. I'm going to kind of give you guys an idea of what an audit can possibly generate in tax dollars for your entities. As you can see, we're not the massive community that Harris is, Houston, but we're a decent sized community with 425,000 parcels. We decided we send out postcards, we do all of our due diligence just like anybody else, but anytime we find through vendors that there is another tool available, and you're going to hear that word a lot, we always use the word tools, you want to take advantage of that. And so we decided, let's see where we are. We thought we were doing pretty good, but let's see where we are and what else we can do to help the taxing entities by generating a little more revenue. Next slide, please. So what kind of experience did we have? We went through the same process, and we're very similar to what Houston did in the RFPs, the bidding process, and following the tax code for the state of Texas. And we finally started, after going through all of that, in May of 2017. It took us a while to get it done because we had never done it before, and we wanted to ensure that we looked at all the parcels. Well, we ended up processing about 15,000, almost 16,000 parcels. And if you look on the slide, you can get an idea of the total count we did, the ones we determined was no action, and of course the ones that removed. In the initial report, we were showing that they were not in compliance, By having local control with LexisNexis, we were able to then go back in and determine which ones did we really need to make an adjustment to. We mailed our own letters that had our own letterhead on it so that we could be in control, and people realized who we were. They already know, bad CADs. They already know the assessment offices. So they knew this was us. This wasn't an outside company. So by being able to do that, we were able to continue the job that LexisNexis did and go further. So that you can see, after researching it, we were able to contact and allow a little bit more processing. One of the things we wanted to avoid, and I'm sure y'all have the same situation, is the last thing you want to do and have in the media is that you removed some 80-plus-year-old's exemption when all they needed to was refile and be reclassified. So we really wanted to be careful. We're very much a big retirement community, a big military retirement community. So we didn't want to put anybody in distress by just automatically removing. So there was a lot of research that was done. So it did take us a little bit while, but it was very well worth it. And if we go to the next slide, I'm going to give you an idea of 3 of our biggest entities here and what it actually generated. If you look at from 2018 and prior, for the El Paso Independent School District, which is our largest of 9 school districts, we generated an increase of about $56 million in property value, which equated to almost $700,000 in tax revenue. We decided, after seeing that, along like Harris, we wanted to continue with the maintenance and keep licenses in our office so we could continue it. In 2019, we generated almost $7 million in value put back on the roll, which is about almost $88,000 in taxes. And I've had school officials tell me that's two beginning teachers' salaries. So it may not look like a lot, but it is a lot for a taxing entity. It's a salary of an employee. It's a difference in maybe their healthcare rate because they have this extra revenue. So you can see for El Paso School District, it was almost $780,000 in taxes. Now, in the state of Texas, like Roland mentioned, the school districts are mandated under state law to have homestead exemptions and over 65 exemptions. If you'll go to the next slide, you're going to see the city of El Paso, which is a local option. They're allowed under local option, the city and the county, to have exemptions for homestead, for over 65, for disabled, for those type of property owners. So if you look at 2018 and prior, we had about $7 million in value that we were able to put back on the roll. So you're almost at $54,000 in taxes. Again, there you go, an employee's salary, something else that they can do with that funding in the general fund. In 2019, by keeping the maintenance in our office, we generated, again, almost $37,000 in taxes. So overall for the city, which is a local option, so it's not as high of an exemption as the schools, they still generated over $90,000 in exemptions by us going into this audit. The next one, please. And now I wanted to show you our county of El Paso. Again, for 2018 and the prior years, the value we put back on was almost $8 million in value, $36,000 in taxes. Remember, your county tax rate is usually one of your lowest. Overall, though, they picked up almost $56,000 in revenue. That, again, could go towards an employment, another employee. It can be used for just virtual things. And plus, it cleans our roll. We continually, year after year, keep a very good appraisal roll and a good exemption roll. This last slide, if we'll go to that, I wanted to show you overall, we have 9 school districts in El Paso County, and all of them, of course, by state law have homestead exemptions and the over 65. 3 of our cities have the local option, and then we have the county that has local option, and then we have 3 specialty districts that have a local option that will allow for a homestead exemption. By using an audit, it helped us generate about $178 million in taxable gain for all of these different entities. So if somebody says, well, we've done a really good job, we have. I will have to disagree with Roland. My staff is the best staff in the universe. But we'll all say that. It's kind of like our child is the prettiest child. My staff is the best. But we can always gain some extra value for the entities that we represent. We can always use help in being the best that we can be. And so by having this audit, it really helped us show the entities that it was worth having the company audit. It was worth keeping a maintenance agreement because we're still adding value to the role. And for like the reasons Roland said, people divorce, they move on. The biggest thing we see here, we have a very large Hispanic community, and the husband of the marriage is usually the one that handles everything. And when he passes, the wife is not always sure what needs to be done. So it could be a couple of years before we're notified that there has been a death. And this has enabled us by having the local control with LexisNexis as, and I'm not supporting one company over another, one vendor over another, but we found having this audit has helped us to generate this without causing a lot of damage to our property owners. And with that being said, I get to introduce Martin Varial from Webb County, and he has a different take on it than Roland and I do. So Martin, it's yours.
Thank you, Dinah. Just to let you all know, my name is Martin, and I am the Chief Appraiser for Webb County. Unlike Harris County and El Paso, I consider our community kind of small, and I would say that most of our accounts are really rural accounts that we work with. The county consists of 3,076 square miles, and our city encompasses about 180 square miles. So you can imagine the big area that we manage when it comes to homesteads, over 65, veteran exemptions, and so on and so forth. So what I wanted to do is kind of just give you that rural-minded perspective of what we went through and what the district here locally procured for services from LexisNexis. Next slide. But before I do that, I just kind of want to give you guys a background of what drives Webb County. In 2019, we levied $508 million in tax levy, which I would say by comparison to El Paso and Travis, it's kind of small, but even then it's still a significant amount. Some of our economic drivers are trade and the Eagle Ford Shale. I represent 8 school districts, United, Laredo Independent School District, who, by the way, offer 10, 50% local option for their homesteads. And I also represent Webb CISD, the City of Laredo, City of El Cenizo, Laredo College, City of Rio Bravo, and Webb County Drainage District. Our population is 274,794, which is less significant than Harris and El Paso. However, I do manage 40,000 accounts that do have homestead and over 65s. Now, I want you all to keep in mind that my customer service department manages that area, and on a yearly basis, I do specific audits on these accounts to ensure the accuracy and the validity of their eligibility requirements for each of these property owners. Like Dinah mentioned, my population is predominantly Hispanic, and it is very common to name your children, especially your oldest, with the same name of the parents. For example, you know, I didn't put on my profile that I'm Martin Villarreal the 4th, and my son's the 5th, and my dad is the 3rd, and there's the 2nd and the 1st. So you can imagine that if you all look me up, you're going to find 5 or 6 different versions of Martin Villarreal. Now, ironically, that is pretty common. And you're going to see on some of the reports that I got back from LexisNexis what we had to review when we actually implemented this audit. So next slide, please. Moving on to the next slide, I just wanted to kind of show you a recap of how we've grown. On average, I think Laredo, being such a small community and a dormant community back in 1999, ever since then, we've grown on an average between 5 and 6%. We've gone to 33 employees to 60 employees, and I wanted to mention that because we've pretty much transitioned from a small rural community, even though I still consider ourselves rural, to a more metro type. Next slide, please. So going into this audit engagement, back in 2015, Webb County was approached by LexisNexis for the purpose of auditing our homestead exemptions. Now, at the time when we had LexisNexis do a presentation to the Webb County Appraisal District, I was very skeptical going into this project, only because I was very proud of my staff, like Roland and Dinah, that I was pretty sure that everything that we were working on and auditing, I didn't think we were going to get bad records, because I'm very proud of my staff, and I had implemented all these checks and balances that we run year after year. There's like 10 different audits that we do, and I kind of felt skeptical. Anyhow, one of the points that kind of convinced me going into this project was, hey, I get to audit my records for the first time ever. This was early on when LexisNexis was actually going out throughout the state, and they were pushing this product. And you know, I based on this one criteria, I basically decided to go ahead and proceed with it. Now, some of the reasons why I did it, I knew for a fact that potentially there could be a couple of accounts that were improperly categorized. For sure, I figured that there was going to be exemptions that potentially could have had multiple exemptions. And that is only because I know that I didn't have a way in my audits to capture those properties where people were moving, let's say, out of the county or out of the state, or if someone that was over 65 passed away in another county or outside the state. And that's pretty common because Laredo is right next to the border. And I know that there's a lot of people that go across and stay with family members, and potentially down the road they pass away, and there's no way of us finding out whether they passed or not. So I figured on those two notes that I think the audit would be good. The other thing that really pushed me to get this done was, I know that if I were to do this audit, it would reduce all these audits and duplication of work that I was already doing. And it would minimize redundancy and basically streamline my workflow. So looking at that significant impact, my supervisor and I got together and we said, hey, let's go this route instead of having to do all these audits. And then most important is the increase in revenue for taxing units. Now, I want you to keep in mind, spending what we spent on this project, which was $69,950, it was a significant amount of an expenditure for the appraisal district. So one of the things that I did is I visited with all the taxing units. I had a meeting and I got their approval beforehand and before getting my contract approved, which I thought was very helpful. And you know, for those small rural communities that plan to go this route, I would recommend that you meet with your entities and sell the product to them and let them know what you're going to be accomplishing by moving forward with this kind of an engagement. Next slide, please. So in August 2016, we contracted with LexisNexis. Now, we didn't go through an RFP. What I did is I went ahead and tagged on to a contract that was administered by the state of Texas through the Council of Competitive Government Awarded Contracts, which I thought made things a lot easier in the sense that I didn't have to create an RFP with different specifications and so on and so forth, because I think that would have been time consuming. Now, on that note, when we did contract, our scope of work was to compare and audit a batch of data, which is the district's data, all our homestead accounts, against the data repository set from LexisNexis. Now, as a result of that comparison, we identified that we had 7,533 exemption accounts that were invalid. Next slide, please. When we got back the results, we identified that there were 707 individuals that were deceased. Now, keep in mind, considering that in our culture, we name our children with the same name, you're going to see what my end results, and you're going to make that relationship how common it is. So we also have property owners claiming dual exemptions, property owners claiming dual exemptions outside of Webb, which I thought was pretty neat. We also had single owners under the age of 65 claiming Homestead over 65 exemptions, and so on and so forth. Now, one of the things that I did when I got these results, I got together with my staff and we developed group codes, because one of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted to measure accountability. I wanted to monitor the progress. I wanted to be able to monitor the progress at any given point in time. And I also wanted to audit their work to make sure that they were basically following the procedures that we were implementing in order to account for every item that was going to be checked. Next slide, please. So once we coded that, what we started doing is the staff started auditing and examining each additional records. Along with the contract, we got 4 licenses to the LexisNexis Accurate product, and that gave us the capability to do additional research, and at the same time allowed us to administer due process to these property owners. And that due process comes with letters, notifications, whether it's certified mail or regular mail. We gave notice to the property owners in order to inquire and make sure that if we were going to remove this exemption, it was a valid removal. The other thing is we monitored and tracked their progress by account or parcel. And at any given point, I was able to run reports and determine real time what was the status of my project. The other neat thing that we also did is I tracked the return and I measured the benefits. And I thought that was kind of important. Considering that I was spending $69,000, I figured that my benefit would start coming back to the district after we exceeded that cost. So now, next slide, please. So now one of the things that we also did, moving into the project, I developed a flow chart, and each of these flow charts or tasks that are oriented with a flow chart, we created event codes in our system so I could monitor real time the status of each project or account that the employees were reviewing. This way I could measure how many accounts have been reviewed versus those that hadn't been reviewed, and also how many accounts had the exemption removed. Next slide, please. Now moving in, the end result of the project, and this is one of the reports that we were able to generate. You see that breaking down all the different results by category, I was able to determine that out of the 777 accounts, I had 96 accounts where the exemption was removed, which brought in revenues to the different jurisdictions in the amount of 187,316. Now I go back to the fact that there was only 96 accounts that were removed, and all the other accounts, as we were reviewing them, one of the reasons that they were coming back as removals is because the children or family member had the same name as that person that was living on that property. So as we went through that research process and we started putting up our records from the system, we were able to make that determination that, hey, this is a son or this is a brother or some other family member that owned the property. Then those that died in county, we had 73, which I was kind of surprised that we were able to pick up. And then we had 30 that died out of the county that we weren't able to, that we didn't pick up. and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. So in doing the calculation, in the current year, we were able to recapture $221,612, which pretty much exceeds the cost of the project. In addition to that, when you adjust the records for prior years, we were able to save $288,780 for a total recapture of tax levy of $520,392. And that is that we only removed 3.58% or 270 accounts out of the 7,533 potential accounts that could have had invalid homestead exemptions. At the end, capturing 392 accounts, if you look at that amount and you roll it over to the second year and third year, that savings amounts to $1,561,177, which, most of us don't notice that recapture amount in future years, because if I would have kept these accounts and I wouldn't have done the audit, I don't think I would have been able to correct those accounts that were invalid. As a result of us capturing those, I was able to recapture, a significant amount the first year, but then there's the second year and the third year, and then the future years that are coming forward. Then if you look at our rate of return, the first year was 744 to 1, second year was 1488 to 1, and the last year was 22 to 1. Now, I think it was a great success in the sense that I was able to at least recapture my $70,000, even though it's not in the millions. If you look at the second or third year, my savings are kind of significant. And just like Roland and Dinah, who congratulated their employees, my staff, I think, did a great job. I put the systems in place so that way, if we want to do this again in the future, we already have everything in place. And I think it was a great success. And I think for the rural community that are looking to have their records audited, I would say to go ahead and move forward with it, because I think at the end you will find accounts that are invalid. Going into this, I didn't think we were going to find any because of all the audits that we have programmed through our process. I was kind of surprised that we were able to find this much. That's one of the reasons that I was concerned about making sure that my benefit was going to exceed the cost, because I was kind of concerned that I didn't think there was going to be that many accounts that were invalid. So at this time, I'm done. I want to pass it on to Matthew, and then I guess Matthew will then open it up for questions.
Thanks, Martin. I want to thank everybody for attending this virtual presentation. I do want to say that the thing that really makes me stick with state and local as opposed to going to one of the bigger markets, I get asked that, is because we make a real difference. You guys make a real difference in hiring, finding the money to hire teachers, do roads and things like that. That's the kind of things that make people make decisions on where they want to live. So this is why I like doing my part, and I really like hearing about wins on your part. We're going to move into a live question and answer session, and I appreciate you guys listening. Thank you.